Hi everyone. This is a video that I started to write right after reading River, but put aside for a while, not really knowing how to finish it or where to put my stance on the subject matter. Eventually, I decided to procrastinate and say that this would be my video for Pride Month, and here we are. Officially, Warrior Cats has never had LGBTQ representation. No characters of the same gender are ever called mates. And no cat ever has an identity that goes against their assigned binary gender. It's not the writers that make this decision, more so the corporate higher-ups that set guidelines for what they want published. And those guidelines have unfortunately not been in favor of representation. I will never agree with this position, nor understand any argument in favor of it, but thankfully we as a fandom don't have to. There are a myriad of characters in Warrior Cats that the fandom associates with different identities in the LGBTQ community, because we, as the people in the fandom, have so many members of the community. So when we have cats that we want to make fan art of, or just talk about, we can do whatever the heck we want. The most famous examples are Jake Tallstar and Ravenpaw Barley for gay relationships, Leafpool Mothwing as a lesbian couple, and Redtail and Rowan Star as trans males. And it goes way, way beyond them. But the reason these 8 cats are icons for LGBTQ Warrior Cats fans is because they have different levels of queer coding. Basically, while they aren't specifically stated to be queer, they act in ways that lead some, or a lot of us, to interpret them as such. Ravenpaw and Barley live in a barn together, sleep in the same nest, and spend their whole lives together. Can that sort of relationship be platonic? Sure, absolutely. People who live together aren't exclusively romantically involved. But as the readers, we have the freedom to interpret or headcanon them however we want. That could include seeing their relationship as platonic, but it could also include seeing them as a gay couple. And for those identifying as gay who read the books, they can take comfort with them as characters. When we read literature, or just consume any media, we're always looking for points of relatability. So the fact that these personal connections can be made with characters that don't necessarily line up with author intention is by all means a positive thing. So in the newest Warriors book, River, we have another example of a queer-coded character, or at least a cat that I interpreted in that way. You've read the title. I'm talking about Nightheart. Formerly Flamepaw, this character is described throughout the book to be a tomcat. But Nightheart's entire character arc revolves around them not feeling very comfortable with their identity. Mainly because Nightheart's great-grandfather is Firestar, every cat sees Firestar in them, and constantly use Firestar as a point of comparison. But Nightheart is not happy about this because they are a black cat, not orange like Firestar. And overall, they just don't want to live in an ancestor's shadow. Nightheart's sister Finchlight never gets the same connection associated with her. It's not explicitly stated, but it feels like the most logical explanation is that Nightheart gets the association to Firestar, while Finchlight doesn't, on the basis of their assigned genders. There's this implicit bias that assumes that Nightheart would be more masculine like Firestar, while Finchlight wouldn't because she's not a boy. And Nightheart absolutely hates this, as they despise the idea of chasing power and prestige. They don't identify with this famous historical figure of Firestar because they don't want to be seen as so arrogantly high and mighty. The clan's image of Firestar is almost that of toxic masculinity, but of course those traits are not exclusively masculine, so I won't say that for sure. Now, is Nightheart officially transgender? No, not in the slightest. The book doesn't talk about pronouns or them identifying as a girl or anything like that. It's not a perfect fit. Sparkpelt mentions once that she had those expectations too, and she's a she-cat, so it's not like being compared to Firestar is an exclusively gendered issue. And even if they were discussing masculinity, that's still a subject that can be explored in the context of cisgender characters. But still, from a transgender perspective, Nightheart's struggle with being expected to fit into the strong and important image of Firestar is very relatable to a trans woman's struggle of being expected to fit a masculine image just because of the way they were born. In spite of whatever the authors intended, it's a character arc that I can read about and feel heard. And that's not even getting into the fact that there are 2 scenes in particular that add to the trans female Nightheart headcanon even further. First up, when Nightheart meets Nightcloud. Nightcloud looks at Nightheart with complete hostility, but Nightheart reacts by reflecting to herself about how beautiful Nightcloud is with her wiry body and sleek fur. Nightheart identified a cat who was similar to her with her black fur, but with a more fitting identity. Nightheart wants to be like Nightcloud by name and appearance, but the fact that Nightcloud is a female character gives us a chance to read between the lines and potentially assume that Nightheart also saw something in Nightcloud's gender identity. And second, there is the naming ceremony. Nightheart outright refuses the name Flameheart because it is too similar to Fireheart and doesn't match her fur color. Bramblestar concedes to her demand and compromises with the name Nightheart. I think we can all agree that the book isn't trying to teach us that hair color should be the basis on how much a name fits. Regardless of whether it's transgender specific or not, this is clearly a metaphor about our internal identities being at conflict with our external identities. Being unhappy with names is such a huge part of many transgender people's upbringings, so someone of that identity reading this can make that connection. Now mind you, I do not think this is genius writing, nor do I want to argue that queer coding of Nightheart is intentional in any way. What I think happened here was that Nightheart was written in a way that was purposely vague. At its core, Nightheart's story is about having expectations set on you by society or a parental figure, and then not being able to meet them. That's just called growing up. Nightheart's story could represent trans struggles, yes, but it could also represent a kid whose parents forced them to do youth sports even though they hated them, or a student who is pressured to study medicine or law because society puts pressure on them to enter a field of study that pays well. So don't get it twisted. Nightheart's story will not go down a path of gender exploration. We're only going to get the obvious stuff like the Sunbeam romance, or exploring their relationship with their mom Sparkpelt, and probably wanting to leave ThunderClan at some point. A case for the headcanon can be made, and I'm sure there will be more scenes along the way that will support it, but that's all it is, a headcanon. There's no world where it's the grand plan for Nightheart to come out as a she-cat. And I mean, whatever. I don't need a massive corporate publisher to validate how I feel about one of their products. Nightheart is who I want to make of her, and that's all there is to it. Happy Pride Month. Alright, bye everyone.